The Reaper faction is extremely dangerous and difficult to fight. Most of the Reaper's units are incredibly deadly at close to mid-range, and will attempt to close with players as much as possible. The units bring a wide variety of ways to close with players to the table, including charges, biotic teleports, and, of course, lots of covering fire. The biggest problem with the Reaper faction, however, is their ability to buff each other and themselves. Many of the lower tier foot soldiers of the Reaper army will cover themselves with armor plates, which are invulnerable to damage, and must either be shot around or soaked up with fire to remove them from the Reaper units before you can continue to damage the unit itself. This can effectively triple or quadruple any given Reaper unit's health, and, coupled with the high damage and extreme threat they pose in close range, makes this faction difficult to fight. Let's take a look at what units they bring. The Cannibal is the Reaper's foot soldier unit, and it is more deadly than either the Cerberus Assault Trooper or the basic Geth Trooper, and this is because it has higher health than either of the other two factions' basic unit. It is also more difficult to headshot, as the Cannibal's head is extremely small and placed at an awkward place on its body. However, the downside is that Cannibals are large, bulky, and weirdly shaped. The result is that when a Cannibal takes cover, it can typically still be shot at with ease, as large parts of its middle body section will be sticking out all around the cover. Now, Cannibals have one main feature that makes them incredibly annoying. Once a Cannibal dies, a nearby living Cannibal can pick up parts of the dead Cannibal's corpse and use them as armor. Cannibals will often prioritize armoring themselves with their dead comrades over attacking their targets. These plates of armor will cover most of the Cannibal's body and render it invulnerable to damage. These plates can be shot off, but they will soak a pretty high amount of damage before this is done, making an already strong unit even stronger. It is usually a good idea to try and focus fire on Cannibals that are attempting to armor themselves with their dead comrades. It takes them several seconds of stooping over a corpse to apply the armor before they stand back up and continue their attack. They can also armor themselves with the dead bodies of Husks. In addition, Cannibals are capable of using a heavy melee in short range, which can be interrupted with a quick melee or a shotgun blast or any other high damage close range ability. And they can throw frag grenades at distant and entrenched targets. This makes them an extremely deadly foot soldier. However, not as deadly as most of the enemies in the Reaper's army. They should be shot at when you've got spare time between trying to avoid the rain of death the Reaper army is going to pour on you. They are very prone to bunching up and being hit by area of effect abilities and grenades since they are so large, so it is recommended you attempt to take them out in groups rather than individually. The Marauder is the Reaper's shock trooper unit. Marauders walk around with relatively high health and a reasonably high shield, and have much more health and shield than most of the other army's shock trooper units. The Marauders, like all shock troopers, will attempt to take cover and stay at a medium to long range from their targets while unleashing fire from their assault rifle. The main threat of a Marauder is that they are able to apply the armoring to nearby Husks and Cannibals without the use of any corpses. It's very easy to tell when a Marauder is doing this. A Marauder will stop, stand up tall out of cover, and you will be able to see waves of red energy flowing from the Marauder to whatever nearby Husk or Cannibal it is attempting to armor. Due to the fact that Marauders can continually reapply armor to any Husks and Cannibals, it is recommended you try to focus them down before you shoot the Husks and Cannibals themselves, since it's extremely difficult to take down an armored Cannibal or Husk. The Marauder itself, however, poses a very low threat, even in melee range, as it will usually choose to try and fall back and take cover rather than melee a player. They're easy to kill and should be focus fired down before the basic foot soldiers, just to stop them from covering the entire Reaper army with armor. The Husk is the first of the Reaper's specialist units, and is incredibly easy to kill. It has low health and no shielding or armoring, and can be dropped very rapidly. They are capable of covering themselves with armor much the same way as a Cannibal, and this armor can also be applied by Marauders. This will make them a little bit more difficult to take down, but since their heads are still entirely exposed, they can be dropped very quickly. Husks have no ranged capabilities whatsoever, and will simply attempt to run to the nearest player they can find and melee with them. Upon reaching a player, a Husk will either unleash a flurry of standard melee attacks that do reasonable damage, or it will jump up and latch onto the player. This is the most dangerous part of a Husk. If a Husk latches onto a player, he will hold them and attempt to continue to do melee damage to them. The player must mash the melee button to get the Husk off of them, which will result in instantly killing the Husk with a melee, but while the Husk is attached to the player cannot move, shoot, or take cover and is extremely vulnerable to all enemy attacks. Enemy Cannibals and Marauders seem to target players that have a Husk actively attacking them rather than other players, since they're such an easy target. A nearby teammate can shoot the Husk off of players to free them quicker, and save the player from having to go through the lengthy animation of throwing the Husk off of themselves. Even with all of these factors though, Husks are not particularly deadly, as they usually only appear in small numbers, and can be killed very, very quickly. Just take shots at any Husks you see running at you, and they should pose no threat. Ravagers are the second of the Reaper's specialist units, and are by far the most deadly. Ravagers are a mid to long range sort of mobile artillery. They look like... I don't really know what they look like. They look like this. They're little walking fleshy sack turtle things with lasers coming out of their heads. The Ravagers will attempt to target a player with the blue lasers that come out of either side of its head, and then unleash an incredibly high damage laser burst onto the player that will also splash and damage other nearby players. This attack does ridiculously high damage, and can be used from a very long distance away. And as such, the Ravagers usually will not really attempt to close to a player. Simply move wherever they can get to get line of sight, whether this be close or far. Since you can see the blue lasers showing what the Ravager is targeting before it fires, it is relatively easy to avoid the Ravager's fire, but in the heat of battle with the other things the Reaper Army brings to the table, especially all their melee units, it can be difficult to notice those little blue lines of death coming through. If you do, you should attempt to take cover or break line of sight, put something between you and the Ravager, and take care of it on your own terms. The secondary threat of the Ravager are the large pinkish sacs on its body. It has 3, one right in the front and one on either side. If these sacs take too much damage, they will explode and release small swarmers. Another sort of specialist unit, I guess you could say. These swarmers don't pose a whole lot of a threat. They die in one hit from anything and are incredibly vulnerable to area of effect abilities, especially since they all spawn from the Ravager at the same time. But their little attacks can stop your shields from regenerating at a crucial time, and also a large group of swarmers, maybe coming from multiple Ravagers, are more than capable of taking target. In order to stop these swarmers, it is recommended you use area of effect abilities on the Ravager and attempt to target the sacs, so that you'll kill the swarmers as they come. Throwing grenades at Ravagers, as well as area abilities like Incinerate, is extremely effective. The Ravagers have only an armor bar, no health, and will die when their armor is depleted. They have relatively high armor, and should be taken down if they cannot be avoided. Due to their high armor, it's usually easier to avoid the Ravagers until most of the rest of the wave has been cleared out, and then they can be taken care of easily. The Brute is the Reaper's heavy trooper, and as per any heavy trooper, only one Brute can exist at a time. The Brute has only an armor bar and will die when his armor is depleted. However, it has extremely high armor and will take a lot of focused fire to bring down. The Brute has no ranged attack and can only swipe with its claws and melee. However, the Brute does possess the ability to charge over any distance toward its target and deliver a lunging strike that will break the shields or barriers off of any player anywhere near the impact radius when it lands. This does make the Brute somewhat deadly if you are unable to keep track of it. Since the Brute is so large and its only attacks are melee claw swipes and the diving lunge, if you can keep track of a Brute and keep mobile, it is extremely easy to avoid taking any damage from them whatsoever. You can simply dive out of the way of their lunges and they will miss entirely. The most annoying part of a Brute is how much health it has and its ability to easily force the players to relocate, which can cause problems during objective waves. The Brute's chest and shoulders, as well as its upper arms, are covered by huge plates of metal. Any bullets or powers fired into these plates of metal will not deal any damage to the Brute. They can be shot off, but it takes so much fire to remove these plates, and you have to do them one at a time. You'll shoot off one shoulder, not the entire suit of armor. It takes so much focused fire to do this, it's usually not worth doing. The easiest way to take care of a Brute is to wait for it to lunge, and then unload into its backside, which is completely unarmored and very large. Alternatively, it can be taken down easily using teamwork, having players that are not being focused by the Brute unload bullets and powers into its back. Its head is also unarmored, but it can be difficult to shoot as it waves around a lot while it attacks and is not particularly large. The Brute is not really a huge threat and shouldn't be put as a high priority target unless you're in an objective round that requires you to stay in one place, as it can easily force you to move. And finally, the Banshee is the Reaper's mega unit. The Banshee can best be described as walking death incarnate that will end you and everything you've ever known and loved without even blinking its eyes. The Banshee is by far the most deadly unit in Mass Effect multiplayer, and should definitely be treated as such. Use extreme caution when engaging Banshees. Banshees are deadly at short and medium range, but unable to attack at long range, so the most distance you can put between you and the Banshee, the better. However, the Banshee is able to use its biotics to teleport closer to players, which makes it virtually impossible to keep any sort of distance between players and Banshees. Banshees have a relatively high barrier and retardedly high armor, with no actual health bar. Once their armor is depleted, they will die. Once their barrier has gone down, Banshees will make no attempt to fall back and let it regenerate. They will simply continue to push their attack. Banshees have 3 primary attacks. They can fire Carnage, which is a short-range power that is basically a big bolt of fire that comes out of them and is almost impossible to avoid unless you take cover or dodge roll at the last second, as it will target you, like your powers do, enemies. The Carnage does very high damage and has a pretty large blast radius and can do a lot of damage to your entire squad if you're grouped together. When the Banshee is in close range of multiple players, it will stop and fold its arms, and you can kind of see blue energy going into it. This is its most devastating attack. The Banshee will then erupt with a biotic explosion, doing extremely high damage to everyone even remotely close. This will do very high damage to players even 15 or 20 yards away. The blast radius of this detonation is huge and virtually unavoidable. That is the main reason the Banshee is deadly. Combined with its ability to teleport directly into your midst, this can very easily dispatch your entire squad at once. Although it is hard to get away from the Banshee, it is recommended that you at least stay further away from melee range, or keep some sort of cover between you and it at all times, as the Banshee does possess an unbreakable one-hit instant kill melee move that it will use if it ever gets the opportunity. And like the Phantom's instant kill move, you will not be able to be revived after the Banshee has ripped every internal organ out of your body. The Banshees are an extremely high threat and should be focus fired down the second they're spotted. The biggest threat of the Banshee is that it has the highest health out of any of the 3 factions' mega units. Even on the bronze difficulty, a missile launcher will not one-hit kill a Banshee. If you fire a missile at a Banshee with full armor and shields, the Banshee will be reduced to about half armor. You need to rip the barrier off of the Banshee before it can be killed by a single rocket, even on bronze difficulty. They are incredibly difficult to take down and extremely deadly, and your first priority always needs to be full squad focus fire on this behemoth, because it needs to die. And there you have it. Even the most fearsome of foes can easily be taken down with the right strategy. Just remember the tactics and abilities of each foe you face, and you'll have no problem achieving a full extraction. No casualties every time. This is Squiddish. Good hunting to you all.